They asked us if we'd be willing to allow the University of Texas to study her heart, if we'd be willing to donate it for scientific study. We agreed. Rick lost it and went to pieces. He fell to his knees with his head in his hands, sobbing and weeping. I got up from my seat and squatted down next to him, placing a hand on his back, but I didn't know what else to do. I stared at my hand, bouncing up and down with his back, his sobs overtaking the room. It occurred to me then that this was the burden Rick had been carrying, his daughter, his first child. He looked up at me and apologized, and I said, "Rick, don't." He climbed to his feet and hovered for a moment. Then he sat again and continued. Brandon was on a roller coaster at Cedar Point the other day. When he and his friends got off the ride and were walking through the park, he just fell to the ground and died. It's the same thing, Tom. My kids have some kind of heart defect that I gave them. I sat there listening, crying, and having serious trouble trying to be a decent human being. I didn't know what to do or what to say. How do you comfort someone who has just lost a large part of his heart? Then I thought of Melissa, his only remaining child. She was 17, and now she had to deal with the fear of what might be coming at any moment. That's a hell of a burden for a kid to carry, and I wondered if Rick had even given this any thought, that he still had one more child. Then I wondered how I might see her if I was in Rick's shoes. Would I still be able to love her like she's my last blessing? Or would the fear of her impending death cut that away and rob us both of our precious time? For me, the fear of the worst is probably the most daunting of all of life's tests. I simply cannot find complete comfort in life, knowing that at any moment, the most important people in the world can be taken forever. I've always believed that dying is the hardest part of living, not in the sense that I will die someday, but more that I will have to endure the pain of losing somebody that I dearly love when they die. Nothing could possibly be worse. And so as Rick stood in my living room, a living, breathing manifestation of all my worst fears, I felt scared. Scared of the cards life had in store for me, and scared that when they came my way, which I knew eventually they would, I wouldn't have the strength or the will to take them on. I did not attend Brandon's funeral, but I did pay my respects at the funeral home. It was a scene that I'll never forget. There were literally 100 or more teenagers bawling their eyes out, 15-year-olds as far as the eye could see, along with some of their parents. Everyone was weeping when I walked in. Some were huddled in small groups, others sat in fold-up chairs, holding each other and rocking back and forth. "Wish You Were Here" by Pink Floyd was playing through the speakers. I looked around, and there at the coffin, standing over his son, was Rick. He looked up and saw me at the door and immediately headed in my direction. About half the way, he burst into tears. I couldn't swallow. He hugged and cried. He thanked me for coming. Then he smiled at me through his tears and went back to Brandon's side. I sat by myself in the back row. I watched the room, heard the crying, felt the pain. But within the walls of this room, there was nothing but love. People were comforting one another, holding one another, loving one another. I tried to think of a moment in my life when 100 people were crowded together and all of them were loving one another. I couldn't. I tried to imagine the world outside the walls of that funeral home. People were mean, doing drugs, killing. Despite Brandon's death, life was still going on right outside. But how could it be so drastically different out there? People say that God is absent. People say that if He's a loving God, then why do we suffer so much? Why do good people die horrific deaths? Why all the pain, God? And why must a man like Rick have to endure the deaths of his children? Yet with all these questions deserving of an answer that no man can possibly address, I can say without a doubt that God delivers exactly what He says. He is with us in our pain, and I will never question that again after having been in that room. As far as neighbors go, Rick and Gomer will never completely escape my thoughts. The two of them simultaneously represented to me the ironies of life. Thank you.